Hi, in this tutorial we're going to look at the bouncing ball, and it's something that's taught to all animation students because it uses quite a few principles of animation, most importantly squash and stretch. Quickly jump to this little video here. There are 12 principles of animation and we'll go through them as we go along. They were created by Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston. They were animators from the Disney studio, and squash and stretch is quite an important principle. So I'll just play this for a minute.
So the first principle is squash and stretch. This is the principle that animated objects will get longer or flatter to emphasize their speed, momentum, weight, and mass. Here's a bouncing ball that has squash and stretch. And here is one without squash and stretch. See the difference? The amount that an object squashes and stretches says something about its mass. The more squash and stretch, the softer the object. The less squash and stretch, the stiffer the object. This first one looks like a water balloon, and the second one probably would be a bowling ball. Squash and stretch applies to characters too. Look at how this figure is stretching from the speed that he's coming down with, and then he squashes after he lands, before settling in his pose. You can also use squash and stretch to exaggerate facial expressions. Let's add some squash and stretch to this face. When his eyes are closed, his face is squashed, and when he opens his eyes in disbelief, his face stretches up and settles back to normal. It's very important to keep the volume of the object consistent. This is what a lot of people mess up with when they're first trying to do squash and stretch. They'll elongate the ball like this and flatten it like this. This is what you should not do. The overall volume of the ball must be the same. So as the ball gets longer, it also gets narrower. When it gets flatter, it also gets wider. The same goes with cubes. If you're going in with one line, the other lines must go in the opposite direction. The cube should start out narrow, get flat, get narrow again, and then rest. In-betweening with cubes is easy because you can measure the line in between the two lines and then connect them to make the cube. If you master squash and stretch with cubes, the next step is to try to do it in 3D. Another important note is that the ball does not have to be stretching the entire time that it's falling. When it's just starting to fall, it should have its normal shape for the most part. And then when it's just about to hit the bottom, that's when it has the most stretch.
So that's what we're going to look at today, the bouncing ball. As I said, it is the first lesson that is taught to any animation student, as is said here by the angry animator, who's an animator online. You may think, it's a bit boring, a bit dull, but if you do this, it will help you be able to use some of the principles used in animation in general, because it actually uses squash and stretch, as we said, but it also uses arcs, timing, and volume. So the arcs are these curves. You'll find so many arcs in animation. We'll look at it when we animate other things as well. And also timing. These balls are closer together at the top. So in this frame, you draw it here and then it's close together here. That means it's slow. Now if you want something to go really fast, you do a bigger gap. And then the timing is fast. So as it drops, it's being pulled down by gravity, so it's quicker. And when it goes up, it slows down. So that's what you've got to think about when you're doing timing. So let's go back to Animate and we'll create our document. Don't forget it's got to be ActionScript 3. And the width and height is 1920 by 1080, as we always do. And I'm just going to make that 50% so you can see. Now we need to import an image because I'm going to use that as a template, and I'd like you to use it as a template. I could draw it myself because I know the principles and my timing, but I think it'd be better when you're starting to actually have an image to work from. So when I import that, that goes into the library. So if you haven't got the library open, just click on that and drag it in. It's quite a small image, so I'll use the transform tool here. Q is a shortcut, and I'm going to click shift to keep it in proportion when I make it bigger. So I'm going to do it about that size is fine. That's okay. Go back to the move tool. So this layer, I'm going to call it my guide, and then I'll make a new layer, and on that I'll do my bouncing ball. If I right click this and select guide, and you get that little hammer there, that means this won't be shown in your final image. It's just an easier way, and then lock it. So I will just work on this area for now. So we've got 17 balls, so I'm going to make 17 frames. So I'll click F5, or you can right click insert frame. So by inserting a frame, I'm just copying these frames along. I'm not making any keyframes. The only keyframe here is actually in the first keyframe, and in this layer it's empty. See, it's like a transparent center, so there's nothing in there at the moment. So I'm just going to make a circle using my oval tool. If I go back to properties, I'm going to tell the outline to go, and I'm going to make, let's just make a black ball. It doesn't matter what colour you do it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make my bouncing ball a little bit transparent, just this layer, just temporarily. So if you right click and select properties, you get the layer properties, and I'm going to select transparent. Let's try that for now. And so I'll just draw a ball. This may be too transparent. Select V, or you can select the selection tool just so to position it. There you go. Oh, I think I will change that. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so I'm going to insert a keyframe, and that just copies the previous ball. So I'm just going to move it over, insert keyframe, which is F6, or right click insert keyframe. And I'm going to use the arrow keys to position that. And also I'm going to take this snap to objects magnet off here, because that aggravates you, because it will click into place and you won't be able to move it. It gets quite annoying. So I'll insert keyframe again, F6, and now I want a little bit of stretch, so I'm going to use the transform tool and F6. And this time it's really stretched, so I'll make it skinnier, a bit longer. Yep, it's great. Right, F6, and see, when I go to the corner here, I get this little circle arrow. That will just flip it around for me. Maybe it's a bit too much, and then skinnier. That's probably good enough. Yeah, F6 again, and I'll copy it. Right, F6, and then we're going back to just a little bit of stretch. Right, F6 again, and now we're going back to a normal shape. What I could do, that is very similar to this. So if I go to frame 4 and copy frame, I can paste the frame here. Right, F6 again. Pretty much same size, F6. Same size, and now we stretch. Turn it around, bring it down. Yeah, I mean, you could actually just draw these every time if you wanted, but sometimes it's quicker just to repeat and copy the ball. Right, F6 again, and turn it around. That's it, F6. F6. Just turn it. And then for 16, I think I'll just copy 10, so I'll go to frame 10. Yep, it says it's 10. Copy frame, and then select paste frame from the drop down menu. There you go. and F6 again. That's it. So that's a really quick squash and stretch bouncy ball, and you're using the principles of arcs, timing and squash and stretch, and they're all the things that you will use in other aspects of animation as well. So let me just turn the eye off of that and put the loop on for the whole thing, and then just play. You see it clearer. And then I could put the properties back to 100% as well. So you can see there's a nice little squash and stretch, and the timing's quite good. So I want to give that 100% transparency back now. So if I right click and go to the properties, select properties from the drop down, and instead of transparent I'll make visible. Okay, so we then get back our colour. I'll take the loop off as well now. And that's it. I mean, you don't really have to make the layer transparent, it just helps when you're trying to see this image underneath. This basic ball action I've got is from Preston Blair. He's a very old school animator. It just explains the principles of the squash and stretch, so you can have a little read of that as well before you have a go. So as you can see, it's quite straightforward. You can either use the oval tool or you can just draw with the pencil or the brush tool. Don't forget, if you do use a pencil, make sure you've got this on ink, not on straighten, otherwise it'll drive you crazy. Yeah, so it's up to you how you do it. Don't forget these timing principles. Close together is slow, and the wider you move something apart between each frame, that speeds it up. Okay, that's pretty straightforward stuff. Have a go and do your first bouncing ball using squash and stretch principle of animation.